Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of my lecture. On today's episode, we'll be talking about whether or not silence would amount to an admission. In my last lecture, we talked about conduct, whether or not conduct would amount to an admission, and we were able to see that in both cases that was cited, that yes, conduct can amount to an admission. Now let's know whether or not silence will amount to an admission. This is the point where we go to my notes. Now, like conduct, we have to interrogate the cases to understand. Now, in the case of Bessela versus SKENE, the plaintiff sued the defendant for breach of promise of marriage and called her sister, who deposed to the fact that she heard the plaintiff say to the defendant, "You know you always promise to marry me and you don't want to keep your word." To which the defendant made no answer beyond giving to her to induce her to go away. The court held that the plaintiff's conduct, which is silence, amounted to an admission of the promise to marry the plaintiff. Also, in the case of Wiedemann versus Walpole, the defendant failed to reply letters of the plaintiff in which the plaintiff stated that the defendant had promised to marry her. The court held that it did not amount to an admission of the promise to marry her. The judge drew a distinction between business correspondences and social correspondences. In the case of business letter, it is usual to expect a reply, and failure to answer such letter may be regarded as an admission. But in social matters, it may be better on many occasions not to send replies, but the fact of every case must be looked at to determine whether failure to reply a letter would amount to an admission, as seen in the case of GASKILL versus SKENE. Now, in the case of OLOKO versus OLOKO, the respondent filed a cross petition for divorce against the petitioners on the ground of adultery. The respondent had accused the petitioner in the presence of a police officer of adultery. There was no reply or denial of the allegation of adultery. The court held that non-denial is sufficient proof of adultery by the petitioner. So yes, we've looked at three different cases, and from these three different cases we can bring out certain things. Number one, as Wiedemann versus Walpole has told us, there are two types of correspondences. By correspondences, I mean letters, messages, texts, whatever they are, emails. In our today world, we don't send letters again. We now, do email, because I think that's like the fastest. Now, in this case, where it is a social as opposed to a business correspondence, it would mean that silence would not be an admission. Where it is social, where it is my guy now, how far now, or things like that, where you people just gist, you and your babe, you are talking and all that, where somebody doesn't reply you on time or stuff like that, it is not an admission. But where it is a business correspondence, that then would be an admission. Do you understand? Where it is something serious, it will be an admission. Where it's something governmental, something thick, it will be an admission. But where it is just all this very social correspondence, it will not be an admission. Do you understand? But when we change that, when we look at the case of Bessela and SKENE, Bessela was more of a physical thing, and secondly, it was in a deposition. Deposition are all those pre-trial conferences that we usually have before we go to court. If you watched Suits and other legal movies, you see that in a civil matter, before you go to court, in order to get the facts straight and not waste the time of the court, you people can sit down in like a conference room and depose each other, ask each other questions. Now, in that deposition, you could see that a question was asked to the husband or the alleged husband who ran away. Now, a question was asked and then he did not say anything, and then the court held that, why didn't you say anything? Because not saying anything means that you agree that yes, you wanted to marry her. Do you understand? But look at the fact that that was more of a physical thing than in the case of Wiedemann and Walpole, where they have the same subject matter of marriage, but that was a text, or sorry, a letter. Do you understand? That was a letter, and the court said you are not bound to reply. But in physical, where it is social correspondence, but in physical, then it is likely that your silence will now be an admission. Like we can see in OLOKO and OLOKO, where the person was asked in the presence of a police officer and he did not say anything. The police officer there did not mean anything for you not to say anything. So the fact that he did not agree or deny meant that he agreed by silence or by conduct. So there's a thin line between admission by conduct and silence will amount to admission. They are most times interwoven. Do you understand? You can find silence amounting to admission under admission by conduct. Your acts, not just keeping quiet, your acts can tell us something. Do you understand? So for example, let's say there's a murder case and you're a suspect and you kept saying you didn't kill the person, and then all of a sudden they released you on bail, and then you went to the murder scene. Nobody told you where the murder scene was, but you went to the murder scene. That's like an admission by conduct, that you knew where the murder scene was and you were saying certain things in relation to the murder that people will start questioning. Kilon Shele, what is going on? Do you understand? By your conduct, you are beginning to admit, little by little, that you know something in relation to the murder, even though you said you don't even know how the murder came about. Do you understand? So conduct is where you take certain steps or something that would be against what you are stating. Do you understand? Or against the fact in issue in relation to your position. But when you are talking about silence is just keeping quiet. So you can have silence under conduct, and there are other branches under conduct apart from silence. Do you understand? So that's where I'll end my lecture for today. In my next lecture, we'll discuss more important things on admission. I'll see you in my next lecture.